horrific thunderstorm. I'm in my van and I'm in a really dark place. It's one of those darkest places I think I've ever been. And I look, and it's one of those storms where the windscreen wipers won't even clear the rain. And I look to the side of the road and I see this little old lady walking, and I look and go, oh, it's Miss Feckerty. I remember her from years ago. She's the one that preached to me when I was holding the ladder. And I was so mad at her that she would sort of kind of talk to me about this God. How dare you? And then I looked at her and I saw her, and she was drenched and she was old. And she was kind of had one of those old walking frames. And I pulled my van over and I said, you probably don't remember me. I helped the carpenter years ago. Come on, jump in the van, I'll drive you home. And it was a strange relationship was born where this 18, 19-year-old boy befriended a 70-odd-year-old Hungarian missionary. And I would take her bread and milk and are you okay? And really I was saying, tell me about Jesus.
Friends, welcome back to the Wild at Heart podcast here in the week of October 14th. And a huge shout out of thank you to all of you who have been supporting us here through the summer and into the fall. We are crowdfunded, and it's one of Stacy and my favorite thing to do is to give to Wild at Heart and this mission. So I just want to thank everybody for your support. And we have a very, very special podcast this week and over the next couple of weeks. We just rolled out episode 1 of Wild at Heart, the series. This is the kind of the Netflix quote series that we've been talking about for a year now. It's not on Netflix, it's on YouTube for free. And our special guest is Mark Evans this week. If you listen to the Pause app, you'll recognize his voice. If you saw the premiere last Friday, we did a live premiere on October 11th. You'll recognize it. If you haven't had a chance to see Mark's episode, it's in the show notes now. You're going to just flip. It's so good. You're going to flip. But before we go there, before we introduce Mark, before we get into his story, and I think it's going to be a really great podcast, let's take our pause. Wherever this finds you today, wherever you are in your world, all the things that have already come rushing at us to command our emotional attention and our intellectual attention, let's take a moment and set all that down. Father, Jesus, Holy Spirit, oh Lord, I just give everyone and everything to you right now. Everyone in my life, people I love, people I'm concerned about, people who are waiting for something from me at work, just everything. I release all of the people. I release all of the projects and schedules and demands and texts, and just lay it all down. I lay it all down right now. Friends, enter into this for yourself. Ask Jesus what you need to lay down today. And we do this, we lay this down in order to come back to you, God, and our union with you. So breathe into us now. Your love, your life, breathe into us, breath of life. And meet us in this week's conversation. Amen. Okay, everybody, we want to introduce to you a very good friend of ours and a wildly wonderful human being. Mark Evans is an artist living outside of London. And if you're watching my video, he's on screen with us here. If you're listening by audio, Mark, welcome to the Wild at Heart podcast after all these years of listening to us.
Oh, thank you, guys. So good to see you and such an honor to be here.
It's a real honor to have you here, Mark. And many people are going to recognize your voice if they've been using the Pause app. they're going to recognize Mark. He's
Right.
Thursdays for me.
Yes.
Day 4 in the 30 days to resilient experience. I reached out to Mark because his voice is so lovely.
Right. He could read the phone book and I'm in for the whole time.
Yeah, exactly. But Mark, for those of our folks who don't know you well, describe a little bit about your current situation now. I think obviously you've been married to Janie for a while. Tell us about your family.
Yeah, sure. So Janie and I have been married 24 years, it's just our anniversary. And we have 3 kids, although I can't really call 2 of them kids. I have adults. I have my eldest, Isabel, she's 20. And my middle daughter, Indiana, she's 18. And our son, Oscar, he's 14. So we have a wild, creative bunch, and they're full of life and full of beans.
They are. Oscar's a drummer, and you've got dancers and artists, and the apple does not fall far from the tree here.
Yeah.
Friends, if you watch the premiere, you have seen the wild, wild creativity of Mark. His episode is now launched this week on YouTube, free. And you can watch it click on the link in the show notes. But we just wanted to invite you into our podcast audience and get to know you a little bit, Mark, and a little bit about why you're sitting in an artist's studio and kind of what your world is about. But I want to go back to, you didn't grow up in London. You grew up in Wales.
Yes, that's right. I am the grandson of a water bailiff who was a master fisherman who ran all of the rivers and the river authorities right throughout North Wales. So he was a master salmon fisherman and an outdoorsman and general badass. And so I had this heritage and legacy of the outdoors and knives and bows and arrows and guns and rivers and forests and just a boyhood dream.
And yet, I think what people are going to discover as they get into your episode is that part of the redemptive arc of your story, and the Wild at Heart series is trying to tell these redemptive stories from heartache and loss and brokenness into healing and redemption and kind of coming to a new life. For you, it was the story of being the black sheep, if I'm right.
That's right. So I grew up in a family that had a military background, Royal Marines, and this sense of don't show any vulnerability, pull yourself together. Are you a man or a mouse? Don't be soppy. And yet here was this boy who was full of creativity and ideas and wonder. And I constantly felt like I was hitting this wall. And over time and over years, I'm not understanding that. And also this deep spiritual ache, I think, and a longing or a crying out for something bigger. And yet it was met with hard dead ends. And so much of that, it builds this kind of deep resentment or misunderstanding, or who am I, or what's my place in the world? Why don't I fit? Why am I different?
Yeah, and I remember that you telling me about, as a boy, as a highly sensitive child, and that's a real thing. Like, that's a category. We raised a highly sensitive child in Blaine. As a highly sensitive child, your emotions were way bigger than your surroundings, and they certainly were not welcome into your family culture.
Yeah, absolutely. It felt as if my emotional resonance was out of proportion to the things that were going on. And so I was often in trouble. So I remember something happening and my cousin smashed my Lego. I'm an artist. My Lego was epic. And he broke it, he smashed it, and I lost it. And I threw a stone, and I just went outside and threw a stone, and it went through the builder's car window. And there were moments where I would fight with a cousin. I remember I would often throw things. I threw a stone through, it went through my grandmother's porch, or I put my fist through a door. These are just being a boy or early teen. I didn't know how to regulate or understand. It was just this kind of feral rage, and I was always in trouble for it. And so often I was in trouble a lot.
So, Mark, take us from that moment forward. You've got all these stirrings, creativity, questions within you don't seem to fit in fully with those around you. How does that play out in your journey as you get older? For instance, I know you went to art school.
Yeah. So I found escape in the wild outdoors. That was one of my great loves. But one of the things that I found most freedom in was creating my own worlds. Paper and paint and drawings. And I found that in art, I could create a narrative that I suppose I had some sense of control over, or some sense of joy or wonder. And I think for me, art became an escape, and I found I was really good at it. And I remember even being very young in primary school, being able to get out of other lessons by doing things like the school play was on, and they had Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and Willy Wonka, and I was able to convince the maths teacher and the English teacher that I was the only one that could build all the set. And I was able to find art was an escape, so I could escape from the subjects I didn't want by going over here and doing things I loved and building these crazy machines that spat out chocolates. And there was just this a kind of deep joy in art that I felt it was boundaryless.
And yet, the story goes, you get to art school and your particular style, which was realism, I don't know that I'm using the right language around that, but that you get to art school and yet once again, you don't fit in because they're telling you, I'm sorry, you missed your century.
Exactly. So, art school in Wales, in Wrexham, actually, for all of those Ryan Reynolds fans. That's where I studied art, in Wrexham. But it was there I fit in. There it was about exploration. It was a foundation year. That was in 1994. And then I moved to London in 95 with these boyhood, mythic, quite romantic dreams of coming from a small town in Wales and coming to London. And I had this dream that I'd find an old Royal Academy master who'd bring me under his wing and he'd teach me how to paint. And I would find that father figure. And actually what I arrived into in London was the exact opposite, was that you have missed your moment. Figurative art is dead. It's the explosion of the YBA, which is the young British artists, Damien Hirst, Tracy Emin, abstract conceptual work. And I again was a fish out of water. I didn't belong. And so I felt I was always lost, always outside, always too late.
In your episode, and for those people who have just seen the trailer of Wild at Heart, the series, you have this gripping moment where you say, everything that I had swept under the carpet, it just began to tear the carpet up. What were you describing in that season of your life?
So there were seasons of being a young boy where my grandmother brought me up under deep superstition. Do not break a mirror. Do not walk on the cracks in the pavement. Do not walk under a ladder. And my kind of pagan heathenism, not coming from a faith family, was I was living a life where I couldn't ever do anything right. Then I went to art school and I met this girl before I met Janie. And it was a time in the UK when there was a massive push on HIV awareness. And I believed I got AIDS off this girl. And really what was going on was a lifestyle of drug taking and trauma and paranoia and hypochondria and doubting everything. I was in a state of a very, very dark place, and surrounded at art school by people who being in a dark place is kind of cool. It's where you get your creative genius from. So stay in the darkness. But I was trapped, and I hated it. I needed something to get me out.
So even when you were in a creative place, you could sense then, from a pagan background, it sounds like there was some tension between light and dark, a pull toward light, even if you weren't quite sure what that was. Yeah.
As a teenager, I worked for a carpenter, and we went out on a job one Saturday, and I was holding the ladder while the carpenter, my boss, was up the ladder fixing the old windows, old thin glass where you put putty around. And I was holding the ladder and he was fixing this glass, and the client was an old Hungarian missionary in a village in Wales. And so I'm stood there holding the ladder, and she's telling me the gospel the whole time. And I'm pretending I don't want to hear because I'm really in a dark place. But she's telling me about this character called Jesus. And I don't know what to do with it. I can't escape. I'm holding the ladder. I've got nowhere to go. And yet it was seeds that went in. And many years later, so I probably would have been maybe 14, 15 at that point. Fast forward now to I'm 18, 19. I'm driving home one night in a horrific thunderstorm. I'm in my van and I'm in a really dark place. It's one of those darkest places I think I've ever been. And I look, and it's one of those storms where the windscreen wipers won't even clear the rain. And I look to the side of the road and I see this little old lady walking, and I look and go, it's Miss Feckerty. I remember her from years ago. She's the one that preached to me when I was holding the ladder. And I was so mad at her that she would sort of kind of talk to me about this God. How dare you? And then I looked at her and I saw her, and she was drenched and she was old, and she was kind of had one of those old walking frames. And I pulled my van over and I said, you probably don't remember me. I helped the carpenter years ago. Come on, jump in the van. I'll drive you home. And it was a strange relationship was born where this 18, 19-year-old boy befriended a 70-odd-year-old Hungarian missionary. And I would take her bread and milk and, are you okay? And really I was saying, tell me about Jesus. And she was the only one because she wasn't young, she wasn't cool, I didn't have to be hip around her. I could just ask her questions. And she's the one in 1994 who started telling me about this wild man.
That is an awesome story. It was a dark and stormy night. I mean, come on, like that. Mark, there's something about wildness. There's something about wildness and stormy that just goes through your whole story. And how did you find us? How did you get into the Wild at Heart orbit?
Wow. So 94, I came to faith 30 years ago. 95, I moved to London. And what do you do when you come to faith? You try to be good and find a church and try to fit again. And so from 95 right through to the year 2000, I was trying to get involved in church and clean my life up and behave and do what I was told and fit with the programs. And for years, I was the first guy there, helping set up all the sound equipment. I was the last guy to leave. I was hungry and I was wanting something new and different. I wanted to serve. I wanted to figure this thing out. I was alive. I was reborn. It was like this renaissance going on in me. And that lasted for about half a decade. During that time, I met Janie and we fell in love. We got married. And I would say that season started to feel like Saul's armor. If you guys know that story of the young wild shepherd boy trying to do the dutiful thing by the king. And the king says, you can go and fight Goliath, but you have to put on what I tell you to put on. And David says, it doesn't fit. And by about the year 2000, the millennium bug, and all of that time, I realized something isn't working. I'm trapped. I'm trapped in a wall of manners of people who aren't always honest. They're very good and very moral and very nice, and I can't be myself here. And there was one moment, and it was around 2001, and the world had changed at 9/11, and things were, what's happening in this world? This is a wild time. What's going on in this world? And a friend called Andrew Sherman sent me an email. I'll never forget it. And the email said, Mark, read Wild at Heart. It will fuel your jets. And this was 2001. And there was no, I couldn't get online then. So I went and found our little local Christian bookshop in North London. And they didn't have it. And then I went and said, please, can you get it in? Could you get it in? I kept going back, can you get it in? And then they ordered this book in right in the summer of 2001. And I took it away, 2002. I took it away to our little holiday. We went to a Greek island. And the book was covered in tears and sun cream. I was just tears and snot, and I was trying to read it, but I kept having to put it down because I was like, how is this guy reading my life? And that was the beginning of some other deeper awakening.
2001 is when it came out. I mean,
Right.
You were on the cutting edge of the revolution. And then I meet Mark at a Wild at Heart boot camp that we do in Wales.
Yes.
When was that? 2010?
That was 2010. The crazy thing is, I'd written to Ransom Hark back then, 2003, saying, this book has changed my life. There was a little address at the back of the book, and I wrote this letter saying, I don't know who you are or where you are. I know you're in Colorado, which is a long way away, but I don't know what to do. I love you guys. And it was this kind of cry of the heart letter. I don't even know if I asked any questions, just it was kind of a big thank you. So that was maybe 2003. So then you had other books come out and I was devouring all your books. By this point, it's now 2010 and I've read everything I can get. And Oscar was just born. He's a year old. And Janie and I are sharing, okay, it's your lie-in this morning. I'll wake up tomorrow, you're on duty, you're on, so it was my lie-in day. She was up with the kids. It was a Saturday. I didn't have Facebook, Janie had Facebook. And I remember thinking it's my lie-in day, and suddenly, bam, the bedroom door opens, and she comes charging in. I look, I'm like, it's 6 a.m. She's like, wake up. I was like, what? This is my lie-in day. She says, no, John Eldridge is coming to Wales. And I was like, what? And so being a Welshman, this author who I devoured everything was coming to Wales. And it was this random, beautiful moment where I got to come out and meet you guys.
Mark waits in line.
Yes.
For the very end. And he comes up to me to say hello and introduce himself, but also to show me his pocket knives, to show me a collection of pocket knives and to begin to tell the story of the intersection of discovering a whole new way of doing art, discovering that your wildness is good and matters to God, and discovering a wild God that's big enough, with a story big enough to contain all that passion that for years he was just having to just push down and didn't fit in art school and all that. And why were you showing me the pocket knives?
I think I just had to tell you. I remember there was a moment and I said to you, I just want to say thank you. And you looked at me and like you do, you asked the next question. And you said, you looked me in the eyes and you said, for what? And I just broke. And I said, for everything. You've saved my life. I was going mad. I was going mad inside the walls of religion, and I didn't know what to do. And I feel like I found a place, a permission to be who God's called me to be. And I think I just had to show you the knives and tell you some story. And you were very gracious because there was a long line.
Well, what happens, I mean, Alan, you've seen the episode in the series is that, Mark's trying to make artwork and he's trying to fit in the conventional.
Right.
Remember that story?
Yeah.
Janie gives you a leather coat, a leather jacket for Christmas, and the cat scratches grandma and blood gets on the coat, and you go in the kitchen, you're trying to scrape the blood off the leather. Remember that?
Yes. And I love how God continues to come for you, Mark, in the most wild, imaginative ways. Like whether it's the lady coming up while you're holding the ladder and then you see her again in a crazy storm, or it's getting a text or email about Wild at Heart, or then with your grandmother and the cat and the blood and the knife. Like God continually speaks to you in these wild ways.
Absolutely. I think when you really look at the world around us, I mean, what Christian do you know that would invent a giraffe or some of those crazy puffer fish with like a glowing, it's like, God, you're wild. And I think to come home to him and understand no matter how wild we think we may be or how creative we think we can be, when you come to him, you've got nothing on him. It's just, my wildness feels tame in comparison. He's just so full of life. And so I felt at home, and I felt your books and the way you reference films and the way you reference culture. I just thought you understand some of these deep places that I'm struggling through.
Oh, I got to get a t-shirt of that. My wildness feels tame in the presence of God.
So good. Yeah.
That's really good. So the listeners, if you haven't seen the episode yet, you're gonna be blown away, because what we're not telling you is that Mark is actually a world-class artist, and he's got people from the Middle East flying over in private jets to look at his work, and I mean he's become, in coming to his own heart and passion, and coming to the passionate God, he's also come into his own rights and created his own way of doing art. And it was this blood that got on this leather jacket, and he was scratching at it with a pocket knife, and he realized, wait a second, you can get down beneath the shine in the leather, and you can actually begin to etch design into it. And then you can, put ink and color into that. And yeah, it's blown the art world away, because it's just a brand new thing that Mark does.
The art world is a strange place. In many ways, it's the Wild West, because it's utterly unregulated. Gold is regulated, finance is regulated, diamonds are regulated. Art is not regulated. I could do anything on a canvas, and if I've got a name, I could sell it for millions. And so there's this strange place of the art world where it is its own place. And again, that system is you have to kind of take the golden handcuff deal, and you sell yourself to a gallery, and they look after you. And I couldn't do that. I didn't fit within that world. And so because what I do takes so long, and it's so painstaking, and it's literally blood, sweat, and tears, and each piece is created quite literally on a knife edge, hundreds and thousands of hours, that these pieces become like my babies. And so therefore I feel I want to sell them to someone who understands the value of it and the worth of it and intrinsic time and effort. And especially in a world like now, where AI is everywhere, everything's artificial, everything's quick, everything's instant, to slow down and to carve something in leather, in flesh, it's literally incarnate. And if you understand your Italian or your Latin, carne, meat, incarnate, in meat, in flesh. And so I'm carving into skin something that was a living, breathing creature. And for me, it just feels like this utter gift from God, that he would allow an accident in a leather jacket to become something that would open up a whole new paradigm and pathway and adventure with him.
You described your life once as a square peg in a round hole. And then you said, no, that's not a worthy analogy. And you upgraded it.
Exactly. So everyone knows a square peg and a round hole, and it's very binary. But we're an intelligent, educated people now. No one's going to try and put a square peg in a round hole, unless you're a toddler. And the reality of life is, I think, as we try to fit and mask, it's more nuanced than that. And it's more like a heptagonal peg in an octagonal hole. And it looks as though it'll fit. I'll try to fit here. If I just adjust slightly, maybe I'll fit and they'll accept me. But the reality is, a 7-sided shape won't fit in an 8-sided hole. And so therefore we need to find environments where it just feels effortless and we can be true.
Yeah.
So Mark, you've got, it's so clear, a heart for the outsider, for the black sheep, for the one that won't fit into culture the way everybody else is saying, just conform.
Or into church, right?
Right.
And fit into church, and so many people can relate to that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Church, art world, your whole life, right? So you've done something pretty remarkable with that. You're reaching out to those individuals, those men, in a really unique way. Tell us about what you're doing now.
So it began again with a conversation with you, John. I came to see you in Santa Cruz, and we had breakfast and we sat and had oatmeal. We were in the giant redwoods. I needed another boot camp, and I this time came with a friend, and we flew over, and we were in Santa Cruz in the giant redwoods. And you said, "Come see me for breakfast." And I said, "John, I've got this idea. I want to start this men's thing in the UK." And I kind of pitched this big, grand idea over breakfast. And you sat there eating your oatmeal with very kind eyes and listened. And you said, "Mark, please don't do any of that. It will kill you." You said, "Here's what I advise you to do." You said, "I love your heart. Go back home and gather 5 or 6 guys, and don't go big and wide, go small and deep." And that was exactly the permission I needed. Something then happened where I went out to Greece. There's a little island Janie and I go. It's our honeymoon island. It's Skiathos. If anyone loves that ABBA Mamma Mia film, that's the island where they filmed it. It's beautiful. It's paradise. And I have a little place where I go. I swim about 1/3 of the mile off the coast, and there's this rock. I can go to this rock and pray and hear God and listen to him. And I've heard some things on that rock that have adjusted the entire course of my life. The first one I heard was in 2003, and I was in a really difficult place with understanding my calling. The blood had happened on the jacket. I didn't know what to do with it. I was trying, and I was making all these failed prototypes. And on that rock outcrop in Greece, I'm praying, crying out, and I hear as clear as anything God say this to me. He said, "If you look after the poorest of the poor, I will put you in front of the richest of the rich." And that was a life-changing word. It set me on fire, and he's done it. I'm so blessed in that some of the people who are my clients, it's ridiculous for a farm boy from Wales. And that's my creative journey. Now there's a whole other side. So I'm back now. It's 2012. It's the year of the Olympics. Everyone's come to London and we escape. And I'm on this rock and I'm praying 9 years later. And I said, "God, what do you want me to do? Tell me what you want me to do." And I heard 2 words, "Start fire." I was like, "Start fire? That's kind of great, but kind of vague. Start fire." I'm on this rock. I'm Welsh. I'm getting bad sunburn because I've swam out and I forgot to put sun cream on. And I realized I need to get back quickly because I'm getting sunburned. So I'm backstroking off this rock. And what I didn't realize is the seagulls were nesting and they're dive bombing me because I'm interrupting their nesting process. So all these seagulls are angry at me, trying to get me off this rock. So I realize I need to backstroke so I don't get the sun on me, so I don't get sunburned. And I'm looking up at the sky, trying to fend off these seagulls. And I'm pondering the words I've heard, start fire, start fire. And then in the sky, written in giant letters, I literally see the big blue sky. I see in white letters the word flame. Start fire. And I see the word flame. I kind of swim back. I start fire, flame. That's kind of okay. So I wake Janie up and she said, "Did you hear anything?" And I said, "Yeah, I felt God say start fire." And then I saw the word flame. And she said, "Okay, that's great. What do we do?" I said, "I don't know. Let's go back to the hotel and get some food." So we're walking on the beach and I'm just splashing kind of, ankle deep. And I look down and I'm about to kick a brick. I'm like, what is that? And I look down and I pull out of the water this. I don't know if you guys can see
Oh my goodness.
It's a fire brick in the water that says flame. And I'm just like beside myself. What are the chances of that? And so that was the confirmation of start fire, flame. And your word to me in Santa Cruz about don't go big, don't go wide, go small and deep. And so what I did, I came back home and I spoke to 6 friends, random friends. One was a pastor, one was an actuary, one was a filmmaker, one was a game designer, one was an accountant, and one was a stand-up comedian. And I said, guys, if I were to host a meeting around my fire pit where we get to talk more honestly than we've ever talked before, would you guys be up for coming? And to a man, they all said yes. And so we started rules like Fight Club. First rule of Fight Club is you do not talk about Fight Club, meaning what's said around the fire stays around the fire. Second rule of Fight Club is if it's your first night, you have to fight, meaning there's no spectators here. If you're going to come to this, you have to tell your story as honestly as you dare. And so we gave each man a night and we told our story. And this began the deepest, most kind of covenantal friendships I've ever experienced. And I knew a couple of these guys for 20 years. I'd known them through church, known them through creativity. But when they got around the fire, I heard their story in a way that you can't unhear the things they've said, the levels of honesty and vulnerability. And so this deep band of brothers was formed. And then it went on, and the guys didn't want to stop. It went on for years. It went on from 2013 right through to 2016. And I started seeing at work, in the gym, around me, some characters that were dangerous, barbarians, ex-convicts, people that would absolutely never fit in church. And I said to Janie, I really want to invite these guys into the garden to come to Band of Brothers around the fire. And Jane said, I don't want those guys knowing where we live. They're dangerous men. We've got young kids. I don't want them coming to our garden. And she said, why don't you find some land that's not ours? And then near my studio, some ancient woodland. And I approached the landowner and I told him the vision of men need a place to be real. British blokes are great at banter. We're really good at humor. But men don't know how to open up in an honest, vulnerable way. And so this thing that became Band of Brothers grew from 2013 to 2016, and it became this mass of brothers, this movement of brotherhood, and it's become known as Mob. And it's just this place where we meet outdoors, and there's no walls and no manners, but just honesty and authenticity.
And the guys coming to these fires are the poorest of the poor in the sense of the internal poverty, right? Mm-hmm. The rawness, the trauma. I don't fit in. It's like the black sheep becomes a shepherd of the black sheep. and guys coming in, guys finding love, finding friendship, finding God around this fire. It's been a phenomenal story.
Yeah.
And Mark, we tell part of that story, folks. If you haven't seen Mark's episode, you got to see it. We're releasing one a week, and so we'll release a new one. So Mark's episode came out last Friday at the premiere. We'll release a new episode this coming Friday and two more after that. But Mark, thank you for the courage and the wildness to come on camera with us and take us into Wales and your boyhood, take us into art school, and then take us into your art and how phenomenal it is, and then to the fires, take us to Mob and to the other barbarians. Thank you. It's such a loving, bold thing you've done, and I adore your episode, and I adore you and who you are.
Oh, thank you. Guys, it's just been a pleasure to talk to you, and until we're around a fire with a cigar next time, thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, let's make that happen soon.
And John, what we can do for anyone watching this, let's just put the trailer on now so they can see that.
Oh, thank you.
Because it's a beautiful 1-minute trailer that goes into Mark's story, and then they can watch the episode. We'll put the link for YouTube for the whole episode in the show notes.
Great. And if you're audio listeners, you'll find in the show notes the link of a 1-minute trailer to Mark's episode, and then the full episode link as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. You are a wildly beautiful man.
Thank you, guys. It's been so good to talk to you. Thank you. When I look at a piece of leather, I see something waiting to be brought out of it, something harnessed from the darkness. There's a cavern in me. The things that I'd hoped, okay, I can get some sort of rescue, didn't rescue me. I thought that anybody that had a belief or a faith must be a good person. And I was nothing like that. And any of those kind of people definitely didn't understand me. We're in a war. You need allies. You need people that can see you in the places you can't see yourself. I'd always thought these wild places were just something you've got to tame, control, cut off. God is wild. He is not safe. He is this wild one.